Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Come on in. Ask you to take a deep breath as you arrive, to feel yourself in this space as we gather. And I ask Phil to help us gather with a little bit of audio from under the water today. Listen to the sounds of the more than human world. Welcome, everyone. Come on in. Kind of want to say the water's fine. Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I put the link to our order of service in the chat. Welcome to the Compassion Consortium Sunday service. I'm Reverend Sarah Bowen, an animal chaplain and interspecies minister. And I'm joined today by co-founders Reverend William Melton, Reverend Erica Allison, Victoria Moran, and a fly who has graced me with his presence here. So you may see me doing a little bit of this today. It's truly interspecies church over here. I'd also like to give a big welcome to our guest speakers, Rabbi Shmuly Yanklowitz and April Tam Smith, and a warm welcome to all of you. We meet the fourth Sunday of every month. We hope to see you often. Please do whatever you need to do to keep yourself comfortable. Our chat will remain closed until a little later in the service. I'm speaking to you today from the Hudson Valley of New York, the land cherished by the Mohican and the Munsee Lenape, and home to many beings, including, but of course not limited to, the fly in my room, the diamondback terrapin, the peregrine falcon, the green darner dragonfly, the white-tailed deer, and the Hudson River water nymph, who grows nowhere else on earth. I invite you to take a deep breath and relax. Note the presence of any other species who might be near you. They are all welcome here. For a moment, think about the last time you truly rested, or treated a day or an hour as Sabbath, or perhaps the last time you slept so soundly that no noise could wake you. Today, we're going to be talking about rest, about Sabbath as spiritual practice. Now, there's a myth that mama bears have babies in hibernation and don't even know it. When I first heard this, I thought, oh, I was a little jealous, actually. Birth without pain, birth without distress, ease-filled sleep for months. Sign me up. But eventually, I learned that human perceptions, surprise, surprise, of hibernation are too good to be true. Yet I remained fascinated with the concept of deeply intentional rest and of Sabbath. Also referred to as Shabbat, this tradition comes to us from Jewish roots, yet it can inspire people of any spiritual path. It comes from a creation myth, and it's said that after 6 days of creating, Hashem ceased doing anything on the seventh day, instead resting as the Creator took in creation, spending time in it just as it was. No need to fix it, no need to create, no need to change, no need to wish anything any different than it was. And so the practice of Sabbath encourages us to do the same thing, to rest as well. I confess, when I first heard about the practice as a kid, I misunderstood it, focusing on all the can'ts. My best friend couldn't cook or drive or spend money on Saturdays. But luckily, he helped me shift my perception to understand that his family willingly chose to give up certain things based on his religion's sacred texts in favor of spending time together, to connect to each other and to connect to their spirituality. And while it's tempting to think that relaxing these days is binge watching Netflix or some other mindless activity, David A. Cooper, author of the classic book Renewing Your Soul, A Guided Retreat for the Sabbath and Other Days of Rest, suggests this. True Sabbath requires quieting the mind and soul through spiritual practice, dwelling on higher realms, absorbing oneself in contemplation of the divine. From this space, we gain a new appreciation of our relationship with the universe and hopefully deepen our awareness and sense of purpose. So rather than viewing Sabbath as rigid rules that restrict us, today we're going to talk a little bit about some practices inspired by the more than human world that can help us connect. Many animals take time to slow down. They reduce their metabolism and they conserve energy. Zoologists assure us that hibernation is not merely about escaping the cold or a complete shutdown of the body. So what might we learn from other wild species? I have 3 ideas for you today as we get started. Practice number 1 is breathe like an American black bear. Zoologists tell us that bears still do things during hibernation. They just do things slower. For example, during hibernation, a bear takes only 1 to 2 breaths per minute. Inspired by bears, what might happen if we set aside time each day simply to observe our breath for 5 minutes, to tune into our inhales and exhales, to become mindful through our breath? Practice 2, connect like an Australian echidna, which I have a really hard time pronouncing, so it's lucky we also call them the spiny anteater. They're one of the Earth's oldest surviving species, prehistoric, survived while all their neighbors went extinct. And it's been suggested that their ability to hibernate was a key factor in their longevity. While you might think that being covered in spikes might prohibit connecting with others, the solo spiny anteater often mates in the middle of hibernation. So inspired by these beings, consider setting aside 1 afternoon a week to connect with your mate if you have one, slowly. Rather than being rushed into sexual intimacy or lovemaking, spend time relaxing together beforehand and afterward. Set aside your phones, your devices, grab a bowl of berries, some cool iced tea. Enjoy slowness. And the 3rd practice, unite like a box turtle. Classified as endothermic, box turtles cannot make their own body heat, so they rely on their environments to provide them warmth. When temperatures cool, they dig deeper and deeper into the ground. Without heat, they remain sluggish, but awake. Eventually, they enter a state called brumation. Like the box turtle, we can become sluggish when we get disconnected from our spirituality. For many of us, that connection to the divine is essential in helping us create something that we cannot make on our own. So as a practice inspired by the box turtle, set aside 1 day a month to connect with the divine. Call it a Sabbath, call it a relaxation day, call it a we day. Create an oasis from the busyness of the working week. Engage in contemplation and reflection on your life and your connection to the universe around you. Meditate, pray, sing, go forest bathing. Bask in the wonder and awe that our world even exists. Offer your thanks to the mysterious beingness that created it. I hope you'll join me this month in trying out any or all of these 3 practices. And to close my remarks, I'd like to offer a little bit of prayer from the Jewish tradition. Take a deep breath. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam. Blessed is the creation of this universe and the divine energy that created it, that created all that we see and feel in this very, very complex world. Let us remember to set time aside to restore ourselves so that we may be sustained in our critical work to help the more than human world thrive. Amen.
And now it is time for the reading of our Tenets of Agreement by Reverend Mary Lou Driscoll. Reverend Mary Lou is an ordained interspiritual minister and spiritual counselor since 2011. She has a master's degree in nursing from Hunter College. She has over 35 years experience working as a mental health nurse. She serves as a mentor for One Spirit Interfaith Seminary students. And by the way, she was my mentor, where she participates in a weekly prayer call. She also speaks on a weekly radio podcast program, The Power of the Word, a heart-centered metaphysical Bible study. Reverend Mary Lou, please proceed.
Thank you, Reverend William. The Tenets of Agreement. We acknowledge a divine force at the heart of the universe and in all living beings. We may refer to this force as God, but it is known by many names and appears in different forms or as formless. We recognize the common moral principles inherent in all wisdom traditions. We affirm that compassion, reverence for life, and nonviolence are fundamental to religious faith and moral philosophy, and are to be extended to all sentient beings. We stand by the principles of inclusion, diversity, equality, and hold these as essential in our human relations. We hold that non-human animals are imbued with the same essence of life and love as are human animals, and that there is a moral parity between us. We avow that humans do not own the earth, its resources, or its inhabitants, but instead must be involved in their protection and care. We endeavor to eat and live in a kind and sustainable manner, moving away from animal foods and animal-derived clothing, as well as any activities that cause harm to our fellow beings, humans or otherwise. We aim to provide spiritual comfort, fellowship, and food for thought to those practicing or exploring a vegan lifestyle. We offer guidance and peer support for all those seeking a more compassionate and spiritual life. We commit to sharing these principles freely with humility and respect in support of non-human animals and the earth. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that amazing piece, and for all of you. It's time for us to jump into our spiritual practice of the day. And I'm extremely excited to share with you a spiritual practice we have not done yet that is actually one of the most ancient spiritual practices, and it exists in almost every tradition of any religious or spiritual background. Today, we're going to be chanting. We're going to do some chanting with some sheep, which is going to be extra fun. A few fun facts about chanting. There's a yogi mystic named Sadhguru, a spiritual teacher, who often talks about chanting as yes, you repeat a mantra, but what's interesting about chanting is it's more about the sound than it is about the word. And the way he says it is that words connect us into the psychology of humans, but sounds connect us to creation directly. So when we do this mantra today that we're going to be chanting, we're actually going to chant a mantra from the Jewish tradition. We're going to be chanting the mantra Shalom, which means peace. And as we chant this mantra, I'll invite you to use the word Shalom or the sentiment peace to create meaning and to bring you into a contemplative space. But the invitation is to then allow that word and its meaning to take a background to the sound that is coming from the chant. And fun fact number 2, our vocal cords are actually designed specifically to be the vibration that we need for our own body's healing. So as we chant, as we sound, as we sing, as we allow noises and vibrations to come through these vocal cords and out into the world, we're actually receiving the perfect vibration of healing that our bodies need. So I would encourage you to take that in as well as we're chanting. So Phil, if you'll bring up our video. And while the video is loading, and you can go ahead and press play. We've got a few seconds at the beginning. So I'll just invite you again to drop into a comfortable position. Find your feet on the ground, find your seat in the chair if you're sitting, find a comfortable position. And use your breath to anchor you into a place of deep sanctuary within. And as the chanting begins, I invite you to join in. Welcoming you to chant along. Just lingering in the silence for a moment. The silence after the chant is often the deepest solace, the deepest sanctuary. Just feeling that a little bit longer. And I thank you all for your practice today.
Thank you, Reverend Erica. Thank you, everybody. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be introducing someone that many of you know, and those of you who don't know, you're in for such a treat. You know, sometimes we'll hear, remember the old Coca-Cola ad? Well, maybe you only remember it if you're almost as old as I am, that it is the real thing. Well, guess what? Rabbi Shmuly Yanklowitz is the real thing. Oh my goodness. If there were more people like Rabbi Dr. Yanklowitz, I would love to have a close-up view of this world. So Reverend Sarah is going to put his full bio in the chat, so we won't take another minute away from hearing his wonderful wisdom. I will just say that Rabbi Yanklowitz is a sought-after educator and social justice advocate, author of 17 books, twice named one of America's top rabbis by Newsweek, and the foreword has named him among the most inspiring rabbis in America and one of the 50 most influential Jews. And guess what? He's also a vegan. Welcome, Rabbi Shmuly.
Amazing to be with you, Victoria. Always amazing to be with you, and all these great reverends and all these great spiritualists. And I see my friend Jeffrey here, my friend Thomas. So thank you. It's a delight.
It's just a great party. We throw a good party for spiritual folks. So just please give us the capsule version of your spiritual history.
Wow, a spiritual history. So I think that I could frame that through a few different frameworks. It's such an amazing question. I think the first is kind of in a process of awakening, which I most certainly still immersed in. One, primarily of kind of being born and entitled. This world is for me, right? I am here to be a recipient of the world. I'm here to kind of dominate. I'm here to be served, right? When a baby is born, the baby is born with their hands, their fists closed, as if to say, we don't know we need someone else yet. But we know when we see someone die, they die with their hands wide open, reaching out in need of others. And so that emergence from the self as the center to kind of an evolution towards family, towards community, towards world, towards humanity, and towards all of sentient life, towards all of creation. And that consciousness of particularism and universalism has kind of been a trajectory from being raised in an interfaith home with a Christian parent and a Jewish parent, having emerged in practicing in very different ways, living in the ultra-Orthodox community, living in the Reform community, a lot of spaces in between, and then emerging in an interfaith space of realizing our commonality and the dignity of difference, of holding on to difference in a way that enhances our collective. And so I think the last thing I would say there is sort of a trajectory from holding on to suffering, holding on to pain, holding on to all of the challenges in life, and realizing I can hold that more fully if my container is deeper, if my container is in a journey of healing and of growth and of connectivity, and realizing that the justice work in the world for all marginalized, for all who are suffering, is deeply enhanced the deeper we can go spiritually.
Beautiful. So help us a little bit, those of us who are not very familiar with Judaism understand. So I realize Judaism is ancient, it's intricate, and as well as being a religion, it's the history and the culture of a people. But given our tiny little amount of time together, can you just give us a basic understanding of Judaism and its ethical teachings?
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. You're right. It is a total evolution with so many different strands. It's almost impossible to talk about Judaism. Rather, there's Judaisms. They can be so diverse based on the historical period and the cultural context. But essentially, what I think we're looking at, what some have called an attempt at ethical monotheism, is an attempt to reenact the creation story, to see that every life brought into this world is chosen with a mandate to heal a broken world. And that we have a lot of vehicles, internal and external, towards that work of tikkun, that work of repair. That we have been born into and inherited an imperfect world, and to embrace that and love that imperfect world while also working on that repair. And so we have the mitzvot, the commandments, that are mandates and tools towards that repair. And that repair is about self, it is about family, it's about community, and it is about planet, it is about life. And so I think Judaism in its ancient and its contemporary form is about this connectivity to this ancient past and towards this unexpected future of how we can hold on to both be traditionalists and progressives, if you will, where we can both hold on to the richness of what we've learned throughout the past while also paving a new path for the future.
And so for you, with your identity as a religious Jew, how does being a vegan juxtapose there?
Right, amazing. So for some Jews, those are oxymorons. Like if you're a Jew, you embrace the anthropocentric worldview. Like humans are the end of creation, we are the pinnacle of all. And of course, it is part of the religious experience. They wouldn't say to be an exploiter, but to be a beneficiary of consumption of anything that pleases the human self. And we'll find that in every religion, such an ideology. And then we'll find those who take a step further. They say, okay, I have the rights and maybe even obligation to have all of the pleasures in the world with some limitations. We should reduce suffering, you know. But then there is the emergence of the Jewish vegan ethos. And in such an ethos, I believe most authentic to the tradition is both a return to the Garden of Eden of a vegan diet and a fast forward to the Messianic era of a vegan diet, and seeing that we are in the space where we are the ones who are determining what era we live in today, and pulling us towards both of those directions at once. And seeing that the central ethos, I don't want to say of all religions because I can't speak for others, but as a central ethos of Judaism is to be godlike, right? To do godly. And to do godly, primarily, the Talmud says, is to be compassionate and humble. To not ask, how is the world here to serve me, but how am I here to serve? Not what am I going to get today, but what am I going to give today? Not how can I be stronger just to win more, but how can I be more compassionate in order to protect more? And in that sense, I think Judaism is not only synonymous, but necessitates the vegan project.
So you mentioned Genesis, you mentioned the diet given Adam and Eve in Eden. So help us out a little bit with Genesis. So we've got the vegan diet, and then we've got dominion. People get really confused. So you're a rabbi, teach us.
Yeah, totally. So, you know, it's so interesting. This year, we are entering what's called a Shemitah year. On Rosh Hashanah, in 2 weeks, we're entering a Shemitah year, which means a sabbatical year, where we are to allow, we are required every 7 years to let the land rest. It's a form of worker justice. It's a form of animal rights. It is a form of environmental justice. It is a form of allowing things to rest, to heal. It comes from lishmot, to let go of control. Right? It's the same idea of Shabbat. Shabbat, the seventh day being a chance. Don't work your worker. Don't work your animal. Don't work the land. We have to let go of control. And I think in that dominion mandate in Genesis, what's also there, so alongside that, is the learning how to let go. We learn how to control, how to take responsibility, how to protect, and at the same time, we learn how to let go. Anyone who's been a parent knows there's a constant dance as a parent of giving autonomy to a child and providing frameworks and guidance to a child. This is the dance of our lives also with creation, of learning how to hold creation and learning how to be held by creation, learning how to control and let go of control, and realizing our responsibility in both senses. And so I think this stewardship charge we see in Genesis is not a call towards privilege, but a call towards responsibility.
And you mentioned the prophetic era, what we could be working toward in the vision of Isaiah and others. What's that all about?
Okay, well, I want to qualify that Judaism is partially prophetic and partially Talmudic, which is to say that the prophets are radicals. The prophets are radicals. They have a vision of a utopia, and they're willing to be killed to keep that vision alive. The rabbis of the Talmud are moderates. They are incrementalists and gradualists, and they want to offer a pathway to slowly get there. And so Judaism kind of embraces both this incrementalist and this radical approach. And I think this is helpful in our time to think both about an absolute impatience when it comes to our own suffering or someone else's suffering. An absolute radical nature that the soul demands nothing less than every single being having liberation, right? That we have nothing less than bringing God down to earth and bringing us up to the heavenly realm, that there be a break of oppressive systems. And yet this Talmudic approach qualifies that and says, okay, dream of that, fight for that, and live in this world now. Because if you don't live in this world now, you're going to be full of anger. You're going to be full of anger and of hate for those who are not living in your dream. And so how do we hold on to the dream with our sacred community and also live in the broader world where everything we value is constantly being undermined? Everything we fight for is constantly being dismissed, right? And to do that is a psychological and spiritual challenge. And so I think I try to keep the prophets here and I try to keep the sages here saying, go faster, slow down, speed up. And that's part of the dialectical process.
Wow, we need prophets and sages in the animal rights movement, I think. And I think we have them. So Israel is like the most vegan nation on earth. How did that happen? And how can we do it other places?
Okay, well, this is a very loaded question. Israel is a very complicated place. I spent years living there. I have family living there. I'm spiritually engaged, politically engaged in lots of nuanced ways. But just to highlight this particular piece of it, I think that there's two things to say here. One is about the Jewish narrative, and one is about food itself. About food itself, I think we can say that since the biblical era, Jews have a very complex and nuanced relationship to food. It is not primarily about price. It is not primarily about quality of taste. It's not primarily about culture, although it's all of those things. It is primarily about a sanctity experience, which has a few evolutions. As we already talked about, Garden of Eden, vegan diet. Post-flood, after the flood story, there now are some permissions in a limited sense to engage in meat consumption. Moving into the temple era involving animal sacrifices, and then moving into kashrut, the kosher laws that enable one to elevate the food experience to bring more godliness into the world and more ethical practice into consumption. So that's the first bit, is that there's always been a complicated relationship to food, not merely about making a blessing before or after, but an ethical and a spiritual theological dimension. The second is the narrative of suffering. Jews have a very complicated relationship with suffering, as I'm sure every culture does. And a lot of that has to do with being stateless. For 2,000 years living in an exile of pogroms and crusades and Holocaust, where Jews were the quintessential refugee who were used to being powerless. And then emerges the complexity of sovereignty in 1948. And part of what emerges is a very complicated understanding 3 years after the Holocaust of a relationship to suffering, both a deep sort of struggle with our own suffering and with suffering we may inflict. And a big part of that suffering consciousness emerges in regards to animal suffering as well. And so Jews are disproportionately kind of concerned with this. Now, let me be clear. It might sound like a vegan paradise. It's not. There's a disproportionate number of vegans, but the non-vegans, especially in Orthodox culture, a space that I am a part of, are deeply meat-centric. And that's a part of the theological ethos as well. So there's still a lot of work to do there, even though I'm thrilled that while when I go to Israel, it's much easier for me to be a vegan than when I'm here in Scottsdale, Arizona.
So Rabbi Yanklowitz, I need to bring up something that's really awful, but maybe you can shine some light on it. And that is anti-Semitism. We've seen it rear its hideous head several times in recent years. So why do you think this evil persists, and what can all of us do to combat that?
Okay, well, thank you so much for asking that. That's, I always appreciate your questions so much. And, there's really a lot to say there. And I have to be honest, although I have my own strong political leanings, that the rising anti-Semitism is coming both from the far right and the far left. It emerges from the far right of white supremacy that equates Jews with minorities and sees Jews as the organizers of minorities in a certain sense, kind of the quintessential minority. If you look at the shooting in Pittsburgh synagogue, he particularly hated refugees and particularly hated the disproportionate Jewish efforts through Hayas and other organizations to support refugees. And so we see it emerging there. We see the rise of it in the Trump era in regards to how the white supremacists understood Jews in America. And it emerges in the far left in a very different sense, with conspiracy theories that Jews control the world, that Jews actually are the white establishment, Jews are Wall Street, they are Hollywood, they are Congress, and it emerges in the anti-Israel world as well, that essentially Jews are complicit in maintaining colonialism or occupation, and transferring that over to Jews sort of being deceptive as oppressors, but claiming victimhood. And so we see it in both camps in very complex ways. And it's been rising significantly. The number of hate crimes in the last 2 years has been through the roof towards Jews. And so we just appreciate the allyship. And the deepest part of it is just asking the question of how are we seeing that? How are we experiencing that? And we do our best to try to bridge that with other forms of hate we see today towards Muslims, towards people of color, towards immigrants and refugees, towards the LGBTQ community, towards the animal world, which I think few would call hate. But Elie Wiesel famously said the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. It's indifference. That in fact, indifference in many ways is more unbearable than hate itself.
Thank you. Now, I know you through the film A Prayer for Compassion, and the filmmaker Thomas Jackson is here. And you say many wonderful things in that film, but there is one thing that you say, and I think in all honesty, it's highlighted by the fact that Thomas juxtaposed what you said with the most beautiful portrait of a cat. But you say there that when your children were born, each of your children, and you saw each of them for the first time, the kind of overwhelming love you experienced, and that's the kind of love that God has for all of us, human, other than human. So how can we convince fellow believers that this is the case?
Wow. Really a lot to say there. And I think I'm experiencing this right now. My baby is turning 3, my little boy, and kind of looking at his journey. And also as foster parents, children that we don't hold at birth, but we kind of hold immediately when they emerge in our refuge from their own trauma or neglect or abuse. And kind of what does it mean for someone just to become a parent in a moment, not through birth, and the complexities of that. And I think that's right. I think this divinity is so complicated, but this relationship between holding the wounded and being held by them at that same moment is a moment that can evoke such a deep sense of radical, transformative compassion. And I think that has to be our pathway towards the religious, towards the spiritual, to see that is fundamentally the religious experience. More than the realm of the true, it's the realm of the good. We can debate the true. The true is complex. It's divisive in many ways. But the path of the good we can agree on. The path of the good of holding and being held. How do we convince that? I really continue to believe that it is much more through preaching than modeling. And the modeling is through doing our best to be in a process of our own moral growth. That if all we care about is our issue, but no other issues, if all we care about is our issue, but not our character, we won't be looked at as moral exemplars. But if we can live a spiritual life where we are attuned to empathy towards everyone, we are living a life where we are responsive to all others, then that is something that people will be attracted to. And in that process of being attracted, will want to engage in their own growth. And so my vegan growth was very much connected not just to intellectual awakening, not just to a great film or a great sermon. It was connected to meeting people who I was inspired by and seeing how they lived. And I think that this is much less preaching and much more working on ourselves. It's much less pointing out at others and much more seeing the fingers pointing back at ourselves and the work each of us can continue to do.
Oh my goodness, I could listen to you forever. We have exactly 1 minute left. I do want to do a shout out to Jewish Veg. Jeffrey Cohan is here. Wonderful organization. Whether you're Jewish or not, you can get so much help there and so much inspiration. So in this last 45 seconds or whatever it is that we have, Rabbi Yanklowitz, tell us something we can carry with us.
Amazing, amazing. So to carry with us, I just give everyone the blessing, and I hope you'll give it back to me, that we can experience on this moment and every day the shortness of time, that our lives are so short and every moment is so sacred. And we have a choice in every moment to build up or destroy, to construct or to tear down, to lift up others or to push them down. And every moment is a chance for healing. And I wish you all the strength to continue that healing process for yourself and for others. And that may we together build a redeemed world every moment, every day, towards that era of liberation.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you so much.
Bless you in every way and your
you.
wonderful family. All right. Turning it back over to whoever's coming up next.
That would be me. Thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you, Victoria. That was so inspiring and fabulous. And it's a perfect segue into our next section, which is compassion in action. We want to profile members of our community who are showing us what compassion looks like on the ground. And so today I am so excited to introduce you to April Tam Smith. We're going to see a quick video of April's in a moment, but just a quick bio. April Tam Smith works in finance, and she's also invested in helping the vulnerable in New York City. And that includes victims of trafficking and those previously incarcerated. She's the co-owner of PS Kitchen. Check it out if you haven't been there yet. It's an upscale vegan restaurant in New York City's theater district. And it is remarkably operated as a nonprofit. April is a dedicated Christian. She's active at Renaissance Church, and she and her husband are expecting their first baby in October. So Phil, let's see April's video.
I'm Minnie Rowe. PS Kitchen is not your ordinary New York City hipster restaurant. It's a restaurant with a social conscience. It's a place where people in need can get a job, where they give a hand up, not a hand out. Co-founded by an Asian American immigrant, PS Kitchen is her way of paying it forward.
I feel really good.
Raul Rivera is feeling good now, but just a few years ago, he was at the end of his rope.
I looked at myself one day and I said, what is it that you want? What do you want to do with your life? You know, and I said, you know, I'm tired of using drugs. I'm tired of running around the street.
Rivera grew up in the crime-infested South Bronx in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. He was addicted to heroin by the time he was 17, which led to a life in and out of prison. His lowest point was a decade ago when he was homeless and facing another stint behind bars for stabbing a man in a shelter while under the influence of drugs. That's when a judge told him it was either rehab or prison for 7 more years.
To make a change was really uncomfortable for me because I was so used to doing what I was doing, you know, using drugs, committing crimes, and doing things of that nature. So I was so comfortable in that zone.
But he stuck with rehab and eventually got clean. He emerged a changed man, ready to start a new chapter in his life. That's when he realized that his past was holding him back.
It mind-boggled me that I will come so dressed up to a job interview and expecting for this guy to hire me, you know, and I'm a changed man, things should be going right for me, but that wasn't the case. All I wanted was an opportunity. I just want somebody to give me a chance.
Down the road in New York City's Times Square is a vegan restaurant called PS Kitchen that's helping people just like Rivera. Created by April Tam Smith, an Asian American immigrant, The restaurant's mission is to offer employment opportunities for people whose backgrounds put them at a disadvantage. People with a criminal record, recovering drug addicts, and those who are struggling with homelessness.
If I want to help in a sustainable way, in a way that it's going to help them help themselves in a way, doing a business that can offer meaningful work opportunities was the way to go.
A recent study by Prison Policy Initiative, a nonprofit bipartisan advocacy group, found that at its height in 2008, the unemployment rate for the formerly incarcerated was over 27%, which is higher than the unemployment rate during any historical period in U.S. history, including the Great Depression.
As hard as we try to get their resumes ready, to try to, get them new clothes and do different interviews, it's really, really hard at the end of the day if a company or an organization cannot get over that check. And just seeing someone with a difficult background might not necessarily give them that chance they need for the first open door.
Tam Smith fully understands the struggle to find good employment. Her parents immigrated from Hong Kong when she was 11 years old, and she recalls the hardships of those early days. As an only child, she felt the burden to excel. She received scholarships to MIT, Columbia Business School, and is working full-time as a Wall Street banker. For all intents and purposes, she had achieved the American dream. But Tam Smith has bigger dreams of paying it forward.
I am so grateful for the opportunity that I was given, that my family was given when we moved to the States. And I just felt like, wow, who am I that I got so many opportunities? Monica's dinner behind the curtain at 5:45.
She threw herself into giving back, volunteering with trafficking victims, the previously incarcerated, and creating job opportunities for Haitians. That's when she came up with the concept for PS Kitchen, a place that provides employment to those in need, is environmentally friendly, hence the vegan menu, and here's the really interesting part, gives away 100% of its profits to charity.
It's definitely confusing for people. We don't take a salary, of course, at all. It's completely volunteering. Our goal is really just to have a place that gives away the max amount of profit.
So when Rivera walked into that job interview for a dishwasher, fully expecting another rejection, he was overcome by their response.
He says, "Can you be here tomorrow at 6 o'clock?" And I looked at him and I said, "You're hiring me?" He says, "Yeah, be here tomorrow at 6 o'clock." I said, "All right." So I walk out the building and I go right into the corner where the fire department is, and I just put my head up against the wall and I just started crying, man.
Tam Smith says witnessing employees like Rivera rebuild their lives is the reason she created PS Kitchen. As for Rivera, PS Kitchen is not just a job, it's his salvation.
One thing that I would never forget that Raul has said to me, because of this job, I feel valuable. I have that dignity. I'm worth something to society again.
I get up every morning looking forward to come here.
Tam Smith says PS Kitchen is only the beginning. She hopes to one day open a second location in New York City and even dreams of taking it to a global stage. I'm Minnie Rowe for Asian American Life.
So remarkable, April. Thank you so much for that inspiration. So I have one quick question to ask you. And the question is, we talked about this a little bit beforehand. So compassion. It's one thing to offer it to the people we agree with and that are pleasant, but what do you do and how do you go about having compassion in more difficult situations? What wisdom do you have on that question?
Yeah, thank you, Erica. And thank you so much for having me. I just love the word compassion. I felt like it just resonates to such a deep core of everything I believe in. And I think what I love about what we talked about in that conversation is the idea of affirming significance. For me, it's my mission in life, and I think sometimes looking at animal rights, looking at women who are survivors of trafficking, or what we're doing now in Haiti, or people who are coming home from prison. It all kind of has that link. It's just having empathy, having compassion, and also reminding people you are significant, that you're not forgotten, and that certain mistakes doesn't define you, or certain misfortune that might have put somebody at a risk of trafficking, that doesn't define you. Yeah, so that's really my worldview of something that links all of the projects, quote unquote, together.
Thank you so much for inspiring all of us, and everyone who's here. Please go check out PS Kitchen if you're in the New York City area, and replicate something like this on your own in your local community.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes,
thank you so much, April. Rev Sarah, over to you.
I just have to say, best vegan chili cheese fries ever. I live 3 blocks from PS Kitchen, and it's amazing. Amazing. Thank you, April.
Thank you.
So each month we bear witness to the challenges and joys that the human and other than human beings around us are facing. I have been promising you all a fire ritual, and it is today. So in many traditions, fire represents the light of divinity. In some, fire is used to invoke gods or the goddess. These beings can be reached through fire. In ritual, burning is used as a symbol of release, of transformation, of letting go, of rebirth. And so today I'm going to be writing the names that you offer in the chat, and I'll ask Phil to please open the chat and allow people to enter names into it. I'll be writing those names here on a piece of paper. I'll be rolling the paper up, be lighting it on fire, capturing the ashes from it, and putting that in an urn as we go along our ritual today. So I invite you to insert the names of any humans, any other than humans in the chat who are in need of healing, or who have passed on from this life, like Bernard. I'll include the victims of the Haitian quake, the folks who lost their lives in Afghanistan, the people and the other beings who are on the path of Henri, all of these beings. I'd also like to include the squirrels in Waconia, Minnesota, who've been shot, bludgeoned, and left in traps to die. If you'd like to help them, I'll put a link from In Defense of Animals, like I always do, in the chat a little later. For Natalia, for the people who are left in Afghanistan, for anyone who has lost a companion animal this month, for any wildlife who has suffered death on our roads, for Nahama, for Larry, for the safe passage for Penn, his staff and dogs out of Afghanistan. And I can see that you're direct messaging me, folks. They are coming through. Perhaps our regular chat is not coming out. For Ron, for Polly. If you keep adding your names to the list. For Bodie, for Susan, for these and all these names, may these people be free from suffering. May they be free from pain. May they be peaceful and at ease. The wild animals who need shelter during Henri, amen. For Rufus, for Haiti. And now I ask you to take a deep breath with me as we release these prayers into the universe, their energy for healing. Take a breath. When I do prayers in fire ritual, I collect them into this urn. Anything that was not released, anything that needs to stay here for healing. This will be placed on my altar after the service. We ask for any beings that have passed on that they have a most auspicious next lifetime. And we also like to include in our prayers and blessings any joys from the past month. If you have any joys, please add those to the chat too. I'd like to mention gratitude to Rich and Jana Wilson, who for over 30 years operated a 4,700-acre Deerwood Ranch near Laramie, Wyoming. And in compassion, they converted their cattle ranch to a public off-range pasture for 350 wild Mustangs. If you have any joys you'd like to include in the chat today, please feel free to. And while we're doing that, Phil, if you could bring up our group prayer. I invite everyone to take another deep breath. Breath is so important. Breath is life. We know that in the tradition that we are speaking today in Judaism, breath is life. And I ask you to read. And Victoria's grateful she got to talk with Rabbi Shmuly. We are too, Victoria. Just wonderful. If you'll speak these words along with me today. May all creatures everywhere be happy and free. May the thoughts, words, and actions of our lives contribute to this happiness and this freedom for all beings. May it be so. Amen, amen, so mote it be. Thank you all for joining with me in your prayers and your blessings. Thank you for joining us here today. William, over to you for some announcements.
Yes, so first I also would like to thank you for joining us today. And we would like to let you know about a few of the upcoming events before our closing song and fellowship time. So on September 26th, we hope you'll join us next month for our Sunday service with guest Duke McLeod, a practicing Sufi Muslim and emerging Islamic scholar, when we will discuss with Duke veganism in Islam. Then also join us at our Compassionate Practice Talk on Monday, October 11th at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, when we will explore the healing power of animal Reiki with our guests Kathleen Prasad and Leah D'Ambrosio from the Shelter Animal Reiki Association, whose mission is to offer animal Reiki healing energy to the non-human residents residing in shelters and sanctuaries. So lastly, if you enjoyed this service and would like to support future Compassion Consortium programming, we encourage you to donate on our website at the link that is posted in the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you, William. And I have just a couple other closing exciting announcements as well, but I want to let you know a couple of different opportunities to catch the Compassion Consortium on the road, so to speak. We will be in Unity Village, Missouri, October 1st through 3rd in person, offering a workshop on interspecies spirituality. Victoria's giving a great talk as well. We'll be joined with Lisa Kemmerer and Will Tuttle and all sorts of other folks. So please register and join us there. There are safety measures and precautions in place. So you can read about those at the link I'll put in the chat. Also, Compassion Consortium is headed to the Parliament of the World Religions, what I like to call Spiritual Comic-Con. It's an amazing, amazing event with tons of presentations from people all over the world from different spiritual traditions. We were in Toronto a few years ago. This year we're virtual, but if you get our newsletter, you will get information on catching us there and also catching all the other great offerings at the Parliament of the World Religions. And I think that's it.